Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan. In recent years, we've seen a lot of narratives created by the Axis mainstream media sites directed at the fans in defense of woke or just generally bad television shows and movies. And one of the strangest phenomena in this category are the idea of review bombing. The most potent versions of these are with The Last Jedi and with The Rings of Power. Anytime the critics and the audience members disagree with each other on a movie, these mainstream and Axis media sites always go to the idea of review bombing, coming up with fanciful reasons for why the audience dislikes whatever product is put before them. And the fact that it's just bad never seems to cross their minds. Whenever the audience dislike it and the critics love it, they're just like, they can't possibly dislike it for a legitimate reason. It can't possibly be bad. But when the inverse happens, they're just like, oh, it can't possibly be good. It must be some sort of nefarious reason why they think this movie is good. They're always coming up with a nefarious reason for why critics and audience members disagree. And my personal theory on that is because critics are bought off most of the time. You can't trust critics. That's my explanation for why critics and audience members often disagree. And only time that Axis mainstream media sites don't come up with a narrative is when they agree with each other, which is very, very rare. And even then, they try to slip in something like with Top Gun Maverick. Both scores were pretty high for that on sites like Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, and whatnot. They still try to make a right-wing narrative around that. So even when they do agree, it's not free of these review bombing narratives being made. It's just a weird situation going on with recent products, and the next victim of this review bombing narrative is the Disney Plus series Willow. They're saying that it's getting review bombed. Willow is getting review bombed. I saw the first couple episodes. It's horrifically bad. It's Rings of Power level bad, and a lot of people are seeing it for what it is. I mean, in episode 3, they straight up have, like, cowboys in it with modern clothing. Like, someplace you could go to Tennessee and find just two women dressed up. That's how great the costuming was. This show is nonsense, and you can even see the costuming here. The costuming is horrific, the script writing is bad, the acting is wooden at best. The best character in the show, in my opinion, is this one, and that's because she's a block of wood. A neutral character is the best character in this show, and a lot of people believe that. But for some reason, because on sites like Rotten Tomatoes, the critics are raving about it. Oh my god, Disney made it. Oh, it's amazing, it's Disney. And so it must be an example of review bombing for some nefarious reason. No, maybe you can't fathom the idea that maybe these people just think it's bad. Maybe it's that simple. Why is this such a hard concept for Axis and mainstream media sites to comprehend in recent years? Sometimes people think something is bad and they tell you it's bad. It's not for some nefarious reason. It's just bad. And this article by the CBR doesn't really take too hard of a stance on it, but it's still an article about review bombing narrative. And they say Disney Plus Willow series is the largest target of purported review bombing as fans of the franchise take issue with the show's writing and acting. That's a legitimate reason to dislike something, to put out a negative review on it. It's not review bombing if it's legitimate criticism. The definition of review bombing includes it being for a made-up reason, a non-legitimate reason. But criticizing the show's acting and writing, that is a very legitimate reason to dislike something, so it doesn't qualify as review bombing. And yes, it is the largest target apparently because it has like the lowest score. Yeah, it's just that bad. It deserves it 100%. It deserves less than that. And they even go on to talk about Rings of Power. Willow is not the first fantasy show based on an older franchise to be review bombed by the audience members while praised by the professional critics. Yeah, it happens pretty much every time it's from a major studio that has bought off of these critics, or these critics want access to things. There's a reason we call them Axis media sites. They're paid off with access to things. Yes, of course they're going to be positive on anything that comes out of Disney, anything that comes out of Amazon. Why is anybody surprised by this? Why is CBR being illegitimate with their criticism of review bombing here? Oh, it's probably because they've been bought off too. That's why we call them Axis media sites. That's why we call it Shield BR. Amazon Studios' The Lord of the Rings of Power experienced a similar fate when reviewers expressed their frustration at the liberties the creative team took with the Tolkien source material. Again, a very legitimate reason, and again, legitimate criticism disqualifies something from being labeled as review bombing. They ended off with, it was received well by critics, unlike the original movie at the time. So yeah, the original Willow movie is the exact opposite when it comes to critic and audience scores. That's because the original movie was good. Critics hate good. We can see that. You can go through dozens and dozens and dozens of Rotten Tomato scores, for example, on Rotten Tomatoes. Same with Metacritic. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be opposite scores on anything that's actually of substance that they aren't paid off by. Sometimes you'll see some similarity when something that they were paid off for, that they need to say positive things about, is actually good, in the case of some earlier Marvel movies. But this is not a case of that. This is, again, another example of the critics just being entirely worthless, entirely devoid of any integrity. We cannot listen to them. We cannot listen to what they said about the original Willow movie. You just have to go to the audience scores on these things and actually read actual reviews. That's the only way that you can cobble any sort of legitimate idea of what the film or show is actually about. So you have to open it up, you have to read it, take them individually, and look at the audiences specifically. That's the only possible way to glean any sort of positive information out of these sites that are completely worthless these days. And this is yet another example of why Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, and all these other review sites are going down the drains, because all they're used to do is to create weaponizing narratives against the fans, accusing them of review bombing whenever they have legitimate criticism against a show that is being defended by the access mainstream media sites because of the studios involved in its production. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon.
Hey, yo, are you feeling what I'm doing up in here? Oh, I know you are. Do you miss all the good, compelling stories that we used to get back in Hollywood that they ain't putting down no more? Oh, I know you missing it. So check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues, baby. Book 1, Down in Flames. Book 2, Apocalypse Then. These are currently on sale. What are you waiting for? Get your hands on them. And we got Book 3, Kill the Dark, is coming down the pipeline. Just wait for all the good stuff that's dropping. You ain't gonna be disappointed, fam.